What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, good people? Tonight is a historic night. We have a trendsetter in the building with us tonight. No, we're not going to say in the building. Let's go ahead and call it for what it is. We have a trendsetter that's going to be on the perch with us tonight. We don't have buildings around here. We got the cage, baby. So get ready, sit back, relax. We got you covered. This is your boy, the historian. Hey, we got some things that we're going to talk about tonight with our special guest. Gotcha.
Okay, y'all, this is it.
Coming right back to you just like an envelope without a stamp. This is how we do it tonight, baby. We got Coach Camness in the building tonight. We getting ready to get right with this thing tonight, man. What's going on, Coach? You finally done dealing with those bad kids out there on that football field. What's going on? You finally got a break. What's happening?
Finally got a break, but just happy to be home with my family, back to talking football with the fans, and it's a special day for me personally, with the person we're getting ready to talk to. So I'm like a kid in the candy store right now.
Man, all I can do is just sit back and I can just smile right now. I'm like a big kid in the candy store, and it's just like a mythical figure. We got something, we have something coming into this place called what we call a unicorn, a real unicorn. Apparently, you know what I'm saying? We've been hoping for a unicorn to play for the Atlanta Falcons, but we don't have that. But guess what? We have a mythical figure that's coming into the building that not only started a trend, she was a trailblazer and broke down so many barriers in the NFL, and not just the NFL, across sports in general for women. So, look, as we say in the BirdCage, you either get right or you get left. We got to get you guys right because, it's only right that we show the ladies as much love as we show our male athletes that come through here, because she's really the Jackie Robinson for females when it comes to not just the scouting world, but women working in top positions where they have eyes and have an opinion on how teams are going to function. That's that's big, because at that time during the 70s, you really didn't have a lot of women making those choices at that time. So again, it's a real honor and a pleasure to have into the cage with us on the perch style. We have Miss Connie Carberg in the building. Welcome to the building. Welcome to the cage, Miss Carberg. How you doing?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here with you both.
Well, it's a pleasure being able to rub elbows with greatness and actually know what it feels like to have a unicorn in your presence. Yeah, I said it. I don't care. Y'all Kyle Pitts fans can go to hell.
I love it.
I'm just joking. Nah, I'm praying that he does well this year. Really, I do, because first round pick, we definitely got to get something out of it. But we made history by drafting him that high. A tight end's never been drafted that high. And then let's flip it. Let's flip it like this. The New York Jets made history with you. But before we get to the days with the Jets, let's go ahead and get the folks acclimated with your story. Where are you from? How did you get started in the football? And how did you get involved with the Jets organization off the rip?
All righty, I'll start in. Okay, I lived on Babylon, Long Island, about an hour outside of New York City on the South Shore. And my mom and dad, my dad was a doctor, and he became, along with my uncle, when they were the Titans before they were the Jets. Harry Wismer was the owner. And he asked my uncle, Dr. James Nicholas, to be the team doctor with the Titans. And he said yes. And then he asked my father, who was the internist. So they both decided to go ahead and do it. This is really, very rare. This is back in the early 60s. And so I knew I was a tomboy. I played all kinds of sports. I was always with my brothers and all their friends. And whether it was basketball or swimming or wiffle ball in the backyard or football, it didn't matter what it was. But we really didn't play football and know a lot about it. That was probably the one sport that, as a girl, you really didn't know much back. Very few girls knew much back in the 60s. So I figured, though, once this happened, I better learn about it. And so I started to learn. I was very lucky. I had an earth science teacher named Paul Albert that I would stay after school and grade papers. And he would explain football. Plus he came to the game with us every week at the Jet game at Shea Stadium, good old Shea Stadium. It was wonderful. So we would go there to the games. He would teach me a lot. Also, Walt Michaels, who was the defensive coordinator of Super Bowl III with the #1 defense. And Coach Michaels also had played for the Cleveland Browns. He played with Jimmy Brown, played with Otto Graham, everybody. And Paul Brown, of course, was the coach. But he was always at the house. He and my dad were close friends. Again, he would teach me a lot about football. We would watch like John Riggins when he was in college at Kansas, and he would tell me basically what you're looking for. So I just, as much as I could, but I didn't know, I had no idea where this was leading me. So I just started that, I started making my own little mock drafts, but just so the audience understands, back when you were, back in the 60s, you didn't have computers. You only had one game on during the week on Saturday, one college football game. And that was it. You had what they call Street and Smith magazine, where you could look at stuff, but there was no such thing as YouTube or Google or, there was no such thing as ESPN or NFL Network or any of those kind of things. So again, it was a very, very different world. You played your game on Sunday. And the newspapers would carry stories, but other than that, it wasn't like it is today where it's 24/7, just constant everywhere. And then, as I said, on YouTube, we have people that are all over the place, just like you guys. So I was very lucky. So I played sport. As I said, I played all sports. I had a really good basketball coach, Mrs. Soul. She was great, and she taught me a lot through high school. And then when the Jets won the Super Bowl, in my senior year in high school, that was the epitome. That was Super Bowl III, the most important Super Bowl of all time. It considered the monumental one because it legitimized the American Football League. The NFL had always looked down their nose at us, and because we were the upstart league. And so the first 2 Super Bowls, which they didn't call them that at that time, the Green Bay Packers won. And so we were Super Bowl III, and Joe Namath, wonderful Joe, Super Bowl III, he guaranteed it. Joe was beyond belief. He was like the Beatles. He was such a superstar. Besides being a quarterback, he had charisma. He just wore the white shoes and the longish hair. He was just a very unique back in those days. And so we won the Super Bowl. And from there, I graduated from high school. I still, as I said, I would just eat, sleep, and drink football. And the more I could learn, the better. And I went to an all-girls college for 2 years. I played basketball. There was no such thing as girls' scholarships for sports back then. There had been no Title IX. So I played at an all-girls college basketball. And something was missing. So I decided to transfer to the Ohio State University, which was my smartest move. And Matt Snell, who was the fullback for the Jets, he was one of the ones that convinced me to go to Ohio State because he loved it so much. And he was from Long Island, too. So I went there and I had to choose a major. Had no idea what to do. Chose a major, home ec education, dietetics. Don't even ask me why I chose it. I became president of my sorority and all the, but there was, again, I decided not to play basketball. Football was king there. So I started going to games there, and then probably the best thing that happened. And again, in life, you never know where things are leading you. Because there's no women in anything. There were no such thing as women coaches, scouts, PR, strength and conditioning, as I said, community service, operations, all the different things that there are now. There were no women. Phyllis George was the first person, and she wasn't even until 1976 for the pre-game show, and she was a Miss America. So I was at Ohio State from 71 to 74. When I went there, one day I went to the student union. I knew that's where the team ate, and I waited till the team came out. And Coach Woody Hayes, who was as famous as any college coach could be of today's world, and I waited till he came out. And I had his book called "You Win with People," which I still have. And I went up to him. I had him sign it to me. We started talking. And he said, there's really nothing. He said, for women, but why don't you just come over to the stadium and we'll meet. So we met at the stadium. I took him up on that right away. Went over there and met, talked about football. And he said, you really love it. But right now there is nothing for women. He said, but when you have a passion, stay with it. Don't give up, because you don't know, you're going down a path in life. You don't know when you're going to make that left turn, that right turn, or U-turn, or keep going straight, and you don't know what's going to happen. But if it's your passion, stay with it, because that's what you love. And he said, I can see that you do. But what I want you to do, he said, is to come. You are invited to come to every single practice here, whether it's closed to the scouts or open to them. If they're there, I want you to talk to them, talk to the players, anybody, the coaches, learn as much as you can. And of course, I had my sorority sisters do all my homework for me, and I would be over at practice every day. So I learned a lot at the Ohio State University, and I graduated in 74.
So can I chime in on this real quick? Because there are some folks, younger viewers that we have on the show, who don't know who the legendary Woody Hayes is. And this is something I got to put out here. I got to live up to the name historian. So if you don't know anything about Woody Hayes, national championship winning coach, one of the best college coaches of all time. He's up there with Bev Bryant. He's up there with
Nick Saban.
With the legend, with Nick Saban. I'm not even going to mention Saban, but yeah, he's up there with Saban. But and I also got to mention Jake Gaither and also the legendary Eddie Robinson, because here's the thing that most people don't talk about Woody Hayes. So Woody Hayes is one of the first coaches that was in the Big Ten outside after Minnesota decided to desegregate their team and bring in players. Woody Hayes looked after the black players that was on his team back in the day. And the way that he did it was, and you can look at his story on ESPN Sports Century if you don't know about it, black players weren't getting full scholarships at that time. And they weren't getting the full tuition, board, room and board, books, and all the knickknacks that you would get with a full scholarship. Woody took money out of his own pocket and he paid for, and the reason I know about this story is because Hall of Famer Mr. Jim Parker, who's one of the greatest and the first offensive lineman in the NFL, played for Woody Hayes. Woody Hayes looked out for him when he was in college and many others that came after him. And Woody took part of his paycheck to help pay for this kid, for this young man to get through school and also have the same opportunities as his white counterparts. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because Woody Hayes broke down a barrier with you, bringing a woman into the facility, giving you access to not just the team, but also everything that comes into knowing how to break down not only scouting a team, but also being able to understand how football works from the managerial side of things, also to the game day preparation, and not just the game. There's so many moving parts, and he allowed you into that world when it wasn't popular to let ladies into that world, let alone black scouts into that world either at that time.
No,
you're exactly right. He used to hold coaching clinics at his school, and he would bring in your Jake Gaithers, your Eddie Robinsons, your John Merritts at Tennessee State. You know, he was bringing these guys in outside of Paterno and these guys and actually having coaching clinics. So you're one of the fortunate ones that he broke that barrier down with. And got a shout out to Mr. Doug Plank, Ohio State, Chicago Bear,
Yeah. Yes.
who is watching right now. So shout out to Mr. Plank, BirdCage alumni.
Doug's a great guy, and having a defense named after you, the 46 defense, and a guy that had a good time and played well at Ohio State, but even had a better pro career. And so it's really it really is an amazing thing. And he's a great friend, great guy. Very blessed to know him.
So, and I'm gonna get to it, and I'm gonna let you talk about it. And Cam, I'm gonna let you get after it. But my last question for this right here, and then I'm gonna pass it over back to you, and then Coach Cam. When you got into the opportunity of being able to have that type of access, you already came from a family that was with the NFL. Your dad was the team doctor. You had players coming over to the house all the time and doing different things. Shout out to Coach Billy Joe, too. He's watching. Former Jet, Super Bowl champ, BirdCage alum, another one.
Hey,
Super Bowl champ. When you had that type of access to legendary coach Walt Michaels, Buddy Ryan,
right? Yep.
and so many other intricate functions, how did you take the bull by the horns at Ohio State and just say, okay, coach, I got it. I grew up in this situation. I'm fine and I'm comfortable with being around what you're presenting and bringing to the table. How did you accept that challenge, and what drove you to become great at what you were doing? Because he wasn't just going to bring you in there just to break a barrier if you wasn't going to work.
No, it wasn't. And Ryan, what it was is, as I said, he saw that I had that I had been studying a lot, my knowledge, how much the passion that I had, and I've been very blessed with people that I've met along the way. And as I said, he did just what you were saying about helping other players, and he didn't publicize that. And you also have to remember, back then, coaches weren't making that much money. It's not like they weren't making millions of dollars back then or anything. So what he did, he just took care, and he really stressed education with his players. He felt that if he didn't have them get a degree, that was probably the most important thing, and as well as being a good person. But that was something that he always stressed. And so I was very lucky. My parents came to meet him, and he said that, they could come to practice as long as I came with them. So, but I had no idea, again, still, that this was leading where it was. I just took advantage of this. It was something that I loved. And it was actually probably the one thing that was my comfort zone. I didn't have confidence in myself. I didn't go to my prom. I was always a friend, never a girlfriend. I was trying to find a cute guy and all that kind of stuff. But I was always an athlete, and I love sports, and I grew up around it. So that I felt comfort. It was my comfort zone. So after I graduated, I was planning on going back to my old high school, Babylon, and then I was going to teach and then coach girls sports, because then Title IX had just passed. So now there were more opening up to girls sports and scholarships. But what happened was, my father had a 50th birthday party, a lot of friends and family, and Jets were there. My father had the office connected to the house, so the players were always at the house. I was playing, tennis with George Sauer from the Super Bowl team, and Namath would come over, and Emerson Boozer, and you name it. So I said, again, I grew up, and I also talked a lot with them. So Charlie Winter was the head coach of the Jets, and I guess life is pretty much about networking. And I always loved talking to people. And so I sat down with Coach Winter, who was becoming the head coach after Weeb. And we started talking, and he said, man, we're building a brand new complex here at Hofstra University on Long Island in Hempstead. And I can see how much you love football. And you will know when people are coming into the building and this and that. Would you consider working for us? He said, I'd have you be a scouting secretary and receptionist. I said, I'm there. I don't care what time, when, whatever. That's a dream come true for me. So, as I said, I was the only girl in the entire building with the players, the trainers. They had a New York office with the business side, but this was the whole football side. And then all the scouts, and of course they were on the road. And I had a wonderful boss named Mike Hollowback, who was an All-American at Boston College, and knew a lot, and he taught me a lot about football. And So that it started from there. And in 1975, the draft was 17 rounds. They got remember we were talking earlier, I think, about this, Ryan, too, that, they had the World League and there was a lot going on at that time. And they got to the 17th round, and Mike Holloway and Al Ward, who was the general manager, said, Connie, you're going to make that pick. And I went, whoa, because I was the one in the room calling in the picks. I was one who set up the board. There was no such thing as computers, so everything was done by hand. Height, weight, speed, whether you were running a 40 on AstroTurf or grass, because you're always faster on AstroTurf. All that kind of information, but you couldn't just put something in like you do on a computer. I need somebody who's 6'4" and 240 and runs a 4.640, blah, 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 blah. You had to really know all the stuff. So I made the pick, and I chose Mike Bartosik, who was a wide receiver / tight end from the Ohio State University. And I was just glad he wasn't the first, it wasn't the first cut, because when you have 17 rounds and we only have 7 rounds now, so you can imagine such a big difference. So that was in 75. After that, I was still a receptionist. And as I said, everybody was coming in to see Joe Namath, the Incredible Hulk, Pele, Sarah Jessica Parker, because she was doing Annie, you name it, everybody wanted to see Joe. So I made sure I knew what was happening. And it was a very family atmosphere. I could go back to the locker room and just say, girl back. And I'd go back to the locker room and I'd say, oh, I have a girl on the phone that's a big fan of yours, to a player. Would you mind coming up front and talking? And they would do it. It was, it wouldn't happen now, but it happened back then. So, and Joe was still there. And as I said, it was just it was great. And then after that, we were doing game plans back in the locker room. And back in the time, you had a typewriter. My only problem, this is my biggest obstacle, not how men treated me. They were great. My biggest obstacle was I didn't know how to be a secretary. I didn't take shorthand. I didn't go to secretarial school. I didn't know how to type. But thank goodness they hired me for my love of sports and my knowledge and people. And then the other part I could learn, but I was a nervous wreck in the beginning because people would come by and I don't know how to type or anything. I had to kind of fake it and file other stuff until I learned. But I always tell young people, you can learn skills, but you can't learn attitude. And attitude to me is still the number one thing. And I guess that's where a lot of people saw with me was my positive attitude, that I love football and I love people. So between those things, I guess and I felt comfortable in it. When I met my eventual husband, he always used to love just to watch me talk to men. He said it was just so great. He was so great about it. He thought it was so neat. So Al Ward, who was general manager, while we were eating back Chinese food back in the locker room and doing we were doing the game plans, we were typing into these little helmets. And Al Ward was back with Mike Holloway, and they said, Connie, we decided we want you to do some scouting. I said, oh, okay. And that was it. It wasn't like, big headlines or anything like that. I just said, sure. So they sent me down to the Orange Bowl. They sent me to Ohio State, Boston College, USC, a bunch of places that I went, and I loved it. But thank goodness I kept an article, that the Ohio State wrote about me, and also Dick Young, who was a very famous writer, put me being the Girl Scout and how I was scouting for the Jets. So luckily I kept all that stuff. But, back, as I said, it's not like now when a woman does something there, it's like big, headlines. But back then, it really, I don't know, but it worked out perfectly. So anyway, I did the scouting, and that's how it all began. So I was still doing secretarial, I was a receptionist. Then I went to strictly scouting, personnel assistant, and then also scouting after that.
Coach Cam, what you have for Miss Carberg? And by the way, Miss Carberg, before I let Cam go ahead and jump on it, I have one of my aunts that's watching this show, and her name is Connie as well. So so
there are a lot of Connie. So tell her.
Connie, she's watching in the chat.
Is your real name Connie or Constance? Which is it?
It's Conchita.
Oh, okay.
So they call it Connie for short. So I got to make sure I give Auntie a shout out because I said I met somebody with the name Connie. So
yes,
I put it out there.
Yeah, it's not a very.
Cam, what you got from Miss Carberg?
Yeah, so that's great. That's so nice. So that's really basically how it all began. I didn't know that it was going to happen, and as I said, I was very blessed, and I just kept trying to learn. And then just to give you a real quick thing here at the Mr. Hess and they brought in afterwards. Mike Hollowback went to the Tennessee Titans. First, he went to the Patriots, then as the assistant general manager and director of player personnel with the Titans. He's the one that went and got Warren Moon back from Canada. In fact, when I talked to Warren Moon at the Hall of Fame, and he said, "Yep," he said that's a true story. Mike is the one that brought me back over. The 76 and 77 drafts of the New York Jets are two of the greatest drafts you could ever see. Those drafts, we got Marvin Powell, Wesley Walker, Richard Todd, Greg Buttle, Schaefer Suggs, Matt Robinson, Scotty Durkee, Kevin Long, Abdul Salam, Joe Klecko, Dan Alexander. I mean, it was an amazing. Brucey Harper is a free agent. Those two drafts, and that was all Mike Hollowback. And he taught me so much stuff, and so I was able to be a part of that and learning a lot with him. Now, after I did some scouting for a while, and then they had some changes, and Mike left, and another guy came in who was kind of the only person that I really was tough. He didn't know me. I think he was very skeptical, and so between that and Mr. Hess and so Al Ward, who was always one of my believers, but they came up and they said, we don't think a female should just be out there as a representative. So we don't want you flying all over. You can still be local and do scouting. You can still interview players. You can still grade films. Now, people ask me, why didn't you just quit? Why didn't you say, why? How can you do that? But I want everybody to think back to the 1970s. Very different world. All right. And number one, there were no other women. You know how people say you have to see it to be it? No, there was nobody else. I was the first one. So, and then there was one other person in like the 80s, and then nothing until Bruce Arians broke the barrier in 2016 with a lot of people with the Arizona Cardinals. So as I said, I said, I love the Jets. I love football. I can still, I said, great films. I can still, when we bring players in to see if they want to play in New York, you know how they interview players now with the combine. Yeah. The Jets were the first team to have the precursor of it. And before, because there was no ESPN, there was no combine yet. The Jets brought in 100 players, and we went into Lenox Hill and had them examined, and then interviewed them. So I was still able to do that. I always say, if I had quit, I didn't know this was going to happen, but if I had quit and gotten maybe on my high horse and say, but again, that was not my nature. Number one. Number two, it was very different times. So all of a sudden, the Jets were coaching the Senior Bowl. Walt Michaels was coaching the North Squad, and South Squad, I forget who was coaching them, but they were down at the Senior Bowl. And so we had the squad all set. So almost all your first and second round picks, are down at the Senior Bowl. Everybody went back in those days. But Mike Stensrud, who's from Iowa State, defensive lineman, got hurt before on a motorcycle or a ski, I forget which it was, accident. So he couldn't play. So I got a call from my boss on the road. He said, I need you to find somebody to replace him. Now, you got to remember, this is not like now. Again, as I said, you can't go to YouTube. You can't go just to Google. You can't. You had reel-to-reel for tapes, whatever you could find, and you had to pass it on to another team. You had the reports. You would call. You could call the school and try to talk to the trainers or different people if you could find them. So it was hard. So what I did was I went through it. And I tried to find guys that looked like they were going to draft it between the 4th and the 7th round. Okay, because so I said, so I looked through, and I narrowed it down to 5 guys. 4 of them, they were all similar, except one was much faster, but he was from a small school. So now I said, how am I going to make my decision? So I said, I'm going to call. I like to talk to people, so I'm going to call and see how they respond. So I called each one, found them, which took a while. 4 of them said, okay, I can come. When's the Senior Bowl? What do I have to do? I think I'm still in shape. Blah, blah, blah. One guy said, I'm ready right now. Get me on the next plane. All I want to be is an NFL player. I'm ready to hit the quarterback. Blah, blah, blah. I just loved his passion. And so I looked him up, and he ran a 4.55 at 6'5" and 270. But he was from East Central Oklahoma, which was a very small school. But that's because of the way he acted with passion and love and ready to go. I went to Coach Michaels, and I said, I think we should take this guy. His name is Mark Gastineau.
No.
So Cam,
And that's
so on the coaching side of things, Cam, what you got from Miss Carberg?
Yeah, so Miss Carberg, again, it's definitely a pleasure. I'm a girl dad, so for me, this is me being able to get some more insight.
Yeah.
Because I know you touched on it earlier. You had the nickname as the Girl Scout. When you look at the plateau of the NFL, the WNBA, things of that nature, with the things that you had to deal with coming up in the ranks in the 70s and not having Title IX and things of that nature, how do you feel like the progress? Where do you feel the progress is now, as far as, you know, seeing more women on the sidelines, things of that nature? Do you feel like we'll at some point see, you know, a woman being the head coach of a major sports franchise, whether that be the NBA or the NFL or anything like that? And secondly, with Title IX, do you see where there can be more growth and changes in that? Because I still feel like with the exceptional female athletes that we have, I still feel like a lot of times they're still put to the back burner when it comes to finances or being put on the bigger stage or having the audiences that they so rightfully deserve. What can you speak to from that perspective, with you being one of the first to do this?
Yeah, I think, you know, since it started, then there was kind of like a lull, you know, as I was saying to you. How old's your daughter, Coach?
She will be 13 in 2.5 weeks.
Oh, 9. Oh, you're a teenager, huh? Okay. Oh, are you ready?
No, I am not ready.
Does she like sports?
Yes, ma'am. She's actually a 2-sport athlete right now. She plays softball and she's a cheerleader.
Oh, that's very good. Well, as I said, the doors, everything is open now. When in the 70s, there was nobody. Then in the 80s, Ralph Wilson, who was the owner of the Buffalo Bills, his daughter, who passed away at a very young age, she did some, you know, all different things in the 80s. Then there was kind of, as far as not much of anything for a while. And as I said, then all of a sudden, a lot of schools started having these sports administration and sports management majors, which is, again, there's so many females in that right now. You know, that was a great opportunity. There is now tackle football as well as flag football for women, which, you know, so that really has opened up football. As I said, basketball, it's a lot easier. The rules, you know, learning it. Whenever I taught football 101, just even teaching the conception of what a first down, how you get a first down, is probably the hardest thing to explain to somebody who doesn't understand football. It just takes a while. Whereas basketball, we all have played baseball or softball or wiffle ball, or whatever you play, you've played that. You know, swimming, whatever it may be, those sports we kind of know. But as football, so then Bruce Arians, I give him a lot of credit from the Arizona. He took Jen Welter, and that opened the door as an intern. Then the Jets took 3 people in for scouting intern women. Okay, so then, as I said, then it just burst, and one of the ones became Callie Bronson. She became chief of staff of the Cleveland Browns, one of the Jets, the ones that they brought in for scouting. Then the first African American coach, Colette Smith, came in with Todd Bowles, brought her into the Jets. And she knows her stuff. She played tackle, and boy, she knows her stuff. She decided, though, afterwards that I don't think I'm going to follow that part. What she wanted to do is, she's a great speaker. And if you ever follow her on any of the social media, Colette is wonderful. And she goes and speaks to a lot of young girls about life, sports, and yes, you know, believe in yourself, and you can do it. She's fabulous. And so there's all these different things. So then you have the internship. I always tell the young ladies and boys too, internships are really important, no matter where you can go. And if you can get internship, even if it's not exactly what you want, all it takes is one person to believe in you, one person to say, I love the work ethic. I can see she or he love that. And they'll take you with them, or they'll promote you, or they'll bring you into their department. So I think so as I said, I think it's amazing what's available now with all the women's sports. You know, soccer has been big for a while with females, but now a lot of the other sports are coming up. Of course, the Olympics had it, gymnastics. So, but there's no question now that as I said, I think that there's just so many opportunities. I don't know myself, I don't know about being a head coach right away, especially in football. First of all, even almost all the men coaches they work their way up. They start at quality control, right? And they work at a position, and they work as a coordinator. So a lot of them, when Robert, a lot of it's 20 years, 15 years. So you have to kind of see. Now, scouting is something different. You have to have an understanding spouse or be single because you're on the road for 11 to 10 months of the year. So I think, but the doors are open. I think your daughter's going to have whatever she is really, if she has a passion for something, have her go for it. There's just so many opportunities at schools. And now with the NILs, which is, of course, they never had anything like that before. And I know football is going to get probably 75% of it. Basketball is probably going to get another 15%. So you're left with every other sport probably, just sharing that 20 million with all the other sports, male and female. So you won't get as much, but they're certainly going to be making a lot more than anybody else has in the past. And I just think it's up to the young ladies that if they love the thing, as I said, it's all about, to me, it's about her. Nothing should be beneath you. If somebody says, can you get me a cup of coffee? Or can you look this up? Just say, sure, and that, just be positive and have that kind of attitude. If people see enthusiasm and positivity, that's just my belief. I think you can go far. Head coaching, I don't know that. I think that may take a little while in football if it gets there. But all the other positions, I think are definitely available, and there's so much that you can't. Every team has a psychiatrist. Every team has the doctors and the dentists, and they have a person that's in charge of the players, what they might be doing after they get out of football. Then you have community service. Even you've got the flag football thing that every team is helping run. So as I said, there's just so many things that are now, Coach, available to her. She's coming up at a really good time.
Okay, so my one more question for you is more so on the scouting side of things, because that one day that is something that I would love to get to, because I see the game in a different way, because I also played it from the offensive side, but I'm now coaching defense.
Yeah.
So as I'm coaching defense, I'm able to see certain things, and I'm able to kind of put people in the best position to be successful. And I know that during that time you were a Big Ten scout, so I know you got a chance to go around and at different schools and things like that. But what were some of the bigger issues that you dealt with as far as like being given access to certain players, or working with different coaches? Because I know, again, like you stated before, there weren't a lot of
Right.
options for you at that time. So how did you traverse through all of that?
Yeah, I would say that was probably a harder part, except at Ohio State, because when I went there, Coach Hayes gave me carte blanche to anything that I needed to do. But he still remembered me, of course, and so coming back there, whatever tapes I wanted, whatever I wanted, and you had a lot. You started to get a lot more tapes versus another team. The other schools, like Penn State, sometimes they were open. And Paterno couldn't have been nicer when I would talk with him, but some schools were tougher. I didn't get into Michigan because don't forget, I shouldn't even say the word. It's the state up north, but it wasn't as easy. But so I just took whatever part that I could get at that point, because you talk to, maybe if I could talk to a trainer, or I even say go across the street and there's a deli or a little restaurant, and somebody may know a player, and they might say, no, you don't want him. This is the kind of kid he is. Or they might say, oh, this kid is so great. And he brings in his, just the kind of person that he is. Because, when you're from New York, you have to see what kind of player fits into New York. Not everybody does. And not every player wants to be in New York. If you're bringing a kid from as I said, that's why with Mark, I couldn't say that Mark was going to be great. The only thing that helped was he had a very short stint at Arizona State when Frank Cush was there, and they didn't get along. And so he left, and went because Mark was a rodeo guy and with horses and all that kind of stuff. So, but it was, again, it was very different. Trying to at different schools, but men had the same problem too, because they closed up the school. So it wasn't just me. So as I said, I just did my best, whatever I could do, films I could watch, anybody that I could talk to. And if it didn't work, then it didn't work at that point. But I felt as much as I could network and meet people, it was very, very helpful.
So, Ms. Carberg, so we're getting to talking about your days of scouting and different things. I want to get the meat and potatoes and stuff that most people don't understand. So I've heard stories, read books, and we talked about the scouts. Like we talk about Lloyd Wells, you talk about Emily Tennell, when they were the first Black Scouts, Bill Nunn in Pittsburgh. And
Right.
During the times, they still faced discrimination in those leadership positions because they were Black men that were in charge of bringing in talent to help organizations win. And all three of those men were successful at that. When
Yes.
you got your opportunity, a woman coming into this situation, what type of barriers did you face? And also with you being able to balance out married life at that time when you first started, when you got into this, how did you balance married life out? And how did you take on the discrimination of being a woman in an all boys club? Because women at that time, women were discriminated against just as bad as Blacks were in leadership positions in the NFL and major sports. How did you take that and use that as fuel? And how did you balance your at-home life with that?
Ryan, it's interesting. I don't know if ignorance is bliss sometime or not, because most times I got to say, men were really great, and they were, they were really willing to help, because sometimes I don't know everything, and so going to them and asking them, "Can you help me?" or "I don't know this," because I didn't play, right? Since I didn't play, and going and just asking, and you find that most people were very willing on that respect to help. As I said, until I got that last boss, but up until then, and I didn't feel, when I went to those other schools, I didn't feel like they were shutting the door in my face. They were shutting the door in, as I said, most of the scouts' faces on. A lot of times they couldn't, they had certain times you could be there and certain times you couldn't. And so I'm just always a person that looks at the glass half full. So, and as I said, I've met so many, and I grew up with all the Jets. I grew up with, as I said, both with black and white, and we were all together. And that's just the way that it always was. And whether it was with, and with Emerson Boozer, and then with and Matt Snell, and Johnny Sample, and Billy Joe, and as I said, Verlin Biggs, and the AFL, they were actually much more open to having more Black players come in, as we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs, with Buck Buchanan stuff. So again, that was. Even in my high school and around that. So to me, it was very, very, I don't know. As I said, I just felt very natural in that way. Then as far as getting married, I met my husband while I was at the Jets, and I was eating lunch at a Holiday Inn. And that's how I ended up meeting him. And we ended up getting married in 79 because I left in 81 because he got a huge, big job offer down in Florida. But he left the decision up to me. He said, if you want to stay, that's fine, whatever you thought. And I made the decision, and it all worked out. It all worked out great. But during those first 2 years, I was very lucky. Joe Delaney was a running back who they talked about recently. He drowned. Yep. Remember, he was saved. He didn't know how to swim, and yet he went in to try to save those kids.
Yep. And if y'all don't know who Joe Delaney is, he's a former Kansas City Chiefs running back, couldn't swim. He saved one of the children, but he and the other child passed away. They had the anniversary of that the other day.
Yes,
and it was it's very sad, when you sit back and think about it. But he definitely was a great talent, taken too soon, just like the legendary Sean Taylor. I felt like Joe Delaney had an impact like Sean Taylor because he was going to be the next big thing, even though he was in Kansas City. Yeah, he was starting to increase his stock. And if anybody is old school and I'll put it this way. Joe Delaney was, how can I put it? who would I compare him to in today's game? If I had to say, when you talk about that breakaway speed,
breakaway smaller back, like a Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Cook's brother.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook, a healthy Dalvin Cook.
Yeah,
that was pretty much what Joe Delaney was. And the thing was, a lot of guys couldn't catch him. It looked like track meets every time he touched the ball.
Yes, and he was like southeastern Louisiana or something. And I remember
he was a Southern boy.
Right, with my husband, we were dating at the time, and I would take the projector home. That was our date. was watching game films on reel to reel, you know, and Joe Delaney was one of my favorite ones that I was hoping we would draft, but that year we took Freeman McNeil, who turned out the pick after Lawrence Taylor, which was a great pick, and Freeman was great. But Delaney was still there in the second round. It's funny how, you know, people would never do this now, or very rarely. We took 2 running backs, first and second round. We took Marion Barber, big running back from Minnesota.
We know who Marion Barber is because his son played for the Cowboys. We know exactly who Marion Barber is.
Right.
He was definitely a very good football player.
Right. So we took him, and then the Chiefs took, you know, Joe Delaney. But, you know, how rare that is now in today's football world to think you would take 2 running backs, right? First and second round. That's really, because back in the, I did a study from 1975 to 2000. And I took the first 10 picks, right? From those 25. And the first 10 picks, it was 3 running backs to 1 quarterback that would be drafted in the first 10 picks. Now you go from 2000 to now, just the opposite. 1 running back to 3 quarterbacks. So that's how the game has changed so much. So that's why scouting, quarterbacks are now mobile. You can't hit people the way you used to be able to. You can't practice the way. There's just so many differences in scouting. You know, for that type of thing. But it was that. So that's what happened with my husband. And I said, but he was always so supportive through all my years. This will be my 61st year of going to training camp, whether it was when they were at Peak Skill, then after, then when I worked there, then they went to Cortland with Rex Ryan. And then after Rex Ryan, they came back here with Todd Bowles and Adam Gase and Robert Saleh. And so, and I'll be going up. Now we got Aaron Glenn, a former player.
Well, if he takes after Belichick, if he takes after Belichick and Parcells, you already know that's going to be that's going to be like trying to get in with the CIA.
I know.
It's a player I wanted to ask you about. You know, I got to give a shout out to those boys over there at Rains High School in Duval County. Shout out to those guys. They're legendary. What was your involvement in Mr. Derek Gaffney coming into the New York Jets organization? A wide receiver that a lot of people don't talk about, who is a beast on the field. One of
the toughest guys going over the middle. You know, back in the old days, you could, you know, whether it was Jack Tatum or anybody, or Steve Atwater, John Lynch, all these guys, you were allowed to clothesline. You could hit over the guys coming over the middle. They paid a price. And Derek Gaffney was the toughest guy going over the middle. You know, Wesley could go deep. Al Toon would go deep. Lamb Jones is going to go deep. But Derek was not afraid to go over that middle as hard as they would hit him. Quiet. He just passed away recently. It was very sad, but he was a great, great guy. Very quiet.
Rest in peace to Mr. Gaffney. Now, I'm going to say this here. It's not too many Florida Gators I like. But I knew Mr. Gaffney around the way down in Jacksonville when I moved there. You know, he would come to the parks. He would actually help the kids out. People don't know this. A lot of the former players will come to different parks if they're from around that way, and they'll come out there and they'll actually host not clinics, but they'll just see kids out there working out, and they put them through drills, teach them little things to help the players get to that next level. You know, every last one of them was doing it at one point. But I had to mention Mr. Gaffney because he recently passed away. And, you know, I can honestly say it's only 2 Florida Gators I really like. Wilbur Boudier Marshall, who played for your Jets at one point at the end of his career.
Yes, and it was Chicago Bears.
And Derek Gaffney, you know, but other than that, I'm a Georgia Bulldog. The same way you don't like Ohio State, I hate the University of Florida, and I hate Grambling because I love Southern University. So I'm always staying 10 toes down.
So you weren't a Doug Williams fan then for Grambling?
No, I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I love Doug Williams, love Coach Rob, but hate Grambling because I love Southern.
Right.
But you know,
yes,
if he's not, you know, with his if it's not Grambling versus Southern, I got love for Coach Williams.
I got you.
Quarterback Williams, the black Grambling, the black Joe Namath, as they called him.
Look here, little brother. Look here. This year, I told you my nephew just made the team.
I don't care. I hope he does well, but he gonna catch an L on Thanksgiving.
So when it happens, hey, we gotta link up for that game.
Oh, we will. But we already know
brother.
His cousin plays for Grambling State. And see, I love Southern University. Yeah. So this is gonna go back and forth with me and this gentleman here.
That's great. What position?
We know Grambling has we know Grambling has the pedigree because of Coach Rob, Coach Williams. But let's talk about it now. We got one of the greatest corners of all time to come out of our school. Two of them, matter of fact, Aeneas Williams and Mel Blunt. There was the Mel Blunt rule for a reason, sir.
Mel Blunt is so huge. He's unbelievable.
Mel Blunt is a big guy.
Damn, if you gonna speak on Southern, you gonna put some respect on them SU Jags, baby.
Hey, I wasn't speaking no disrespect because you know I'm a brave at heart.
I told you, Miss Carberg,
I'm a brave at heart.
Get off the rails a little bit, so you gotta forgive us.
I'm a brave at heart. I'll core and stay all the way. But to answer your question, my cousin Justin
worse.
What is he?
Shout out to my cousin Justin Holt. He plays running back and he plays cornerback.
Oh, okay. So we're gonna get to watch him.
Absolutely. I'm actually excited. So to my kids who are currently watching this right now, I will be missing this game. To fly to New Orleans to be with my cousin.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, that's special. That's special. I don't blame you a bit. You know.
So, Miss Carberg, so you talked about the side of, we talked about racism, sexism, and different things that, you know, people that are either of color or of a different sex face in that world. When you walked away from the game, were you okay with walking away from the game, or was there still a hunger and a passion to still do this? Or did you just accept your fate and say, you know what, I did what I needed to do, I had fun, now I just get to go, I get to be a mom? But you also coached basketball at a rec center for 15 years down in South and Coral Gables.
I did. You know, it's funny that you asked me, Ron. Yes, I mean, I was so in love, of course, you know, when you get, you know, how you are with married, but I made the decision, didn't know where it was leading us, but I said we had a great life, and then we had our son together. My son, who's 42, and he lives down here. He lives right near me. He and his wife, and my two grandkids, and I have a stepdaughter who's up in Connecticut, and she's an anchor, and her husband, and she's got a 16-year-old daughter, and so it worked. It really worked out. It worked out well. But when I went down to Florida before I got pregnant, I went to work at the NFL alumni, thinking, you know, I still want to do something with football, but it just wasn't quite, you know, and then I knew I could have worked for the Dolphins, because a lot of my friends and people that I work with at the Jets went to work for the Dolphins. Charlie Winter, my friend Gail that was working in pro personnel, Dan Sakanovich, who was our defensive line coach, bunch of people, they all went to work for the Dolphins. And I could have worked there, but there's no way my heart could ever allow me to ever work for another team. So what I did was, after my husband was traveling a lot, this and that. So after my son got a little bit older, and he started playing sports, I coached him in t-ball, flag football, basketball. Then I ran the basketball leagues, you know, played all that. Then when he turned 14, my husband said, let's start coaching girls. So then I switched over and I started coaching JV girls basketball at the high school, and also in the rec league and being, you know, athletic. So I kept all that. And then I also taught football 101 to the Dolphins, even though I don't like the Dolphins. But this one was I was trying to teach women about football. And so I did the part where you teach it. Then they would go outside and, you know, and actually reenact it and try all the different plays and stuff. So as I said, I always try to keep my fingers. And then just the biggest thing probably that happened, though, was about 13 years ago. And my son said, Mom, I just want to make a website called Connie Scouts. He said, I just want it that way. It'll always be there that you were the first female scout. You know, that's all. That's all he had planned. Again, here's something I had no idea. This is what's so different. Social media. Had no idea that, you know, Twitter Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everything would just balloon. And when people saw that I was the first female, ESPNW, which is women, right? And all these different other places, they started asking if they could interview me. And then the Jets, then NFL, then my husband got sick. And we moved up here because before he passed away in 2018, NFL Films called me and they said, we want to do a piece on you. And that's that happened. Then NFL Media did. And it's like everything has just, and so many different people, and just like talking with you guys here, same thing. How you approached me, Ryan, and right away I couldn't wait to do this with you. So it's been a pleasure.
I just love the stories, like, because I watched the piece. If you guys haven't seen the piece, please pull it up on YouTube. Connie Carberg on YouTube talks about her journey and different people she touched. But the one person I find is interesting is in this picture that I have on the screen, a young Joe Namath and a young Connie Carberg when you were definitely playing. And when you talk about, I got to roll this off my tongue because I know I got some Alabama fans watching. I still don't like you. We're going to beat you when you come to the yard this year between the heads. I'm standing on it. I don't care. But shout out to y'all too, because y'all do produce great quarterbacks and y'all produce some of the greatest. And Joe's one of them. But listening to how Joe talked about you and his southern drawl, even though he's a Pennsylvania guy. Well, Connie is just one of the greatest people in the world, And she understood football, and I mean, she was around. But, we just had to have a good time, and, she was there when we won the game. She's always trying to be family. I'm sorry. Joe's just one of the people I just love to emulate and kind of.
His impression is spot on. It's spot on. Your impression is spot on. It was really good. And that picture there that you have with Joe, that was when he was, when he first came up at 65. So I was 14, and I'm wearing a dress. My grandmother made my clothes, and because they didn't have if people probably won't believe this, but they didn't have Fanatics or NFL Shop. Okay, they didn't have anything like that you could wear. No jerseys. Nothing. I always wanted to be a Kansas City Chief because red was an easy color to find. Green is not the easiest color to find. Now of course you can buy the jerseys and stuff, but back then, so my grandmother made this dress with a little Peter Pan collar and all that stuff. And Joe, just meeting Joe then was such a thrill, and he's been amazing through the years. All through the years, and appearing in both things that I've asked, and be part of the book that the girl wrote about my life. That's behind there, Matt. It's X's and O's don't mean I love you. And Joe has been amazing through all these years, and he's still doing wonderfully, thank God. So as I said, it was really a great way. And then Lou Holtz had coached at Ohio State. He was only with us for a year, as you know. He found out the pros were not for him. He missed. He's meant for college football, where you can recruit your kids and everything, versus just being handed a bunch of guys. But he was great with me, and he worked for Woody Hayes, so we had a bond right from the beginning. And his son Skip and everything, who's now coaching in the US and the UFL, or whatever you want to call it right now, right? So I had them. So I had them, and then Walt Michaels came after that. So as I said, I was very blessed in those years with the different people, even though we changed because we weren't winning in the 70s. Then in the 80s, the Jets started with the sack exchange. Okay, yep. Now we drafted all 4 guys when I was there. Abdul Salam, Soldier of Peace from Kent State. He was Larry Falk. And you had Marty Lyons, who was the only big name in the first round, same year as Mark. I got to
put the name out there because I was talking trash about him a while ago. Look, the Jets have an infatuation with Alabama players, and Marty Lyons was on that team that won you guys' one of your last championships during the time he was there. So, yes. During Bear Bryant. So, yeah, shout out.
Yes. And he was on that line. Yeah, he was the first round pick, and then Mark was the second round pick. So that was, you got half the sack exchange. Klecko was a truck driver who went to Temple, was playing minor league football. It was, it wasn't allowed, but it was, again, things were a lot different back then. So here he comes. We get him in the 6th round. We get Abdul in the 7th. So we have the whole sack exchange. And guys played every down then. Once in a while, you had a 5th guy come in. It's not like they rotate a lot of times now, but those guys were out there for every play. Their whole defense was out there. You had a much smaller squad.
They were in better shape than a lot of these players now.
Yeah.
This is what kills me. And you can agree to this because we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
When you look at NFL players now and then, you just said it. They did not come off the field, which means if you look at how they trained, and a lot of them had jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They never came off the field. They played hurt. They played through everything. Now you sprain a foot, you might break a toenail. They're sitting on the side for 3 weeks, and they don't stay on the field all the time. And most coaches now are looking at rotating packages, and they're saying, oh, well, the athletes are better today. Newsflash. The athletes from back then were playing 2 and 3 sports, and were getting recruited at a high level for every sport that they played.
Yes. And they, as I said, right, they're probably, bigger, probably faster now and stronger in some ways, but they get hurt. It's not
durable.
They're
not durable.
No, it's unbelievable. When you see about how they use 67 quarterbacks the last two, not last year, but 2 years before that, when you're not even allowed to hit quarterbacks anymore. And for 32 teams, you use 67 quarterbacks. They're still getting hurt. As I said, and in training camp, they're not allowed to bring a guy to the ground. They have to stay up, and you're basically using a dummy to hit. Well, a dummy can't juke, a dummy can't move, which a real running back does. So it's hard. I can't wait to see how we're going to teach tackling and how we're going to do that, because the CBA kind of changed everything around in 2011. And so
you got to play football to get in condition, and we're not talking about just
you guys know that. You guys know that.
Get tackled to the ground. You have to get accustomed to the beating that you're going to take. And if you think about it, look at how many Achilles injuries we've seen. Look at how many knee injuries we've seen. Guys are not conditioned to take the blows. But another person I wanted to kind of ask you about, and I know you're a basketball lover as well. Did you ever get to have an encounter with the late Pat Summitt on a note of meeting her? Because you guys are both trailblazers in your own rights. I was just curious, buddy of mine asked about that.
It's funny that you asked. When I was coaching down at the girls JV down at Tara, and in the rec league, she came for some. I don't even remember what the reason was, but she came. So in fact, I have a small basketball signed by her. She was awesome. She was really awesome and spoke to all the kids. Yeah, she was again a real trailblazer and a winner. An amazing coach, and gone too soon.
Right.
Agreed.
So, Ms. Carberg, last question for me. With all of our female viewers, me having my daughter, Ryan, his daughter, things like that. Are there any words of advice that you would like to leave them, just in case they're watching this saying, hey, maybe this is a route that I can go, or, this might be something that I'm now interested in, because hearing your story, watching everything that you overcome, being able to be a mother, and, helping scout and draft one of the greatest defensive linemen the NFL has ever seen in Mark Gastineau. So is there anything that you can give them to kind of help that fire that they might be growing when it comes to the game of football or any other sport that they might be chasing?
Yes, number one, I guess number one, find your passion, whatever it is. If it's playing, if it's announcing the sport, if it's writing about it, whatever it is, find whatever that passion is, and number one, stick with that. Number two, you have all the different schools that are offering all these things, and there's more. People don't realize how many different types of jobs there are with sports teams. And so, but if you do take sports management, they have a bachelor, they have masters. And then, as I said, then there's so much offering now, again, with NILs and playing. But the most important, no matter what, as I said, to me, it still comes down to is your attitude. If somebody, it's all about networking. So all sports are a small world. You know how you ask me about somebody and I say, oh, I know that person. You say, Billy Joe, or, right. We just, whatever it may be that you, different people through life, and they come back into your life. And so every person that you meet is important, and treat them as such. Doesn't matter what they do or anything, just treat them the way you want to be treated. And as I said, you'll be amazed. I think, as I said, it's a small world, and somebody will say, oh, I know Coach's daughter, and she's a great girl, and I met her the other day, and I think she'd be good for such and such. And then they could talk to her and find out if that's really what her passion is, or she might try something and say, no, I don't like that, but I think I like this instead. So I think it's about attitude. There are no limits right now. There's so many different things that they can do, as long as they really put their mind to it. That's all I just said. Just enjoy it. And as I said, I had to write down a thing when I was in college, what I wanted to do, or where I saw myself in 5 years. And I thought I had no idea, but I put down, I wanted to be married to a strong man and this and that, and have a family. But if that didn't work, I would like to be something with a sports team, maybe maybe either a writer, or I think it was, and then I put down a scout. Now there were no scouts. I don't even know where that came into my mind, but isn't it amazing? Both things actually happened to me. And so, if you just kind of think that way, a lot of things are possible in this world.
Well, when you talk about the possibilities in this world, I'm just, grateful that we were able to have you to grace our presence in the birdcage tonight, and just really just give us a little insight on what your passion was, how you adapted to it, overcame some of the challenges that you pretty much were blind to, just to keep working. And then this, and then you're dropping nuggets, not just for us, but also for our viewers out here that might be going through something, and just really putting people in a position to believe in things that they might be working towards and they might be ready to give up on. I know some people that's very close to me that's thinking about that as well.
Yeah, don't give up. Don't give up. You don't know where that, as I said, when that one thing is going to happen to you. And if you're too small, or if you're too big, or if you're too this or too that, but if you have that heart, that's how when I did scouting, I come at it from character, from heart, that you love the sport, that whatever it is. When you interviewed Doug Plank, he's not huge, right? But man, he could hit like a truck. And
Doug, when you look at him now, Doug got some size. Doug got a little size on him now. Doug, I'm being honest with you. The pictures he shows while he's on his Facebook, and
he looks great now.
Doug,
but he
Doug
was
is still the thing I look about. The thing I talk about Doug, and I have his book here. Walk the Plank.
Yes.
And your book, X's and O's Don't Mean I Love You. It's coming. It's almost here. Thank God. But Doug Plank, talked about some things that really hit home for me, just like Steve Weich did. And now I'm hearing it from you in this sense. When you look at coming out of nowhere, just doing something that you just want to do, and you put yourself in position to do it, you just do it. You're always going to be prepared for whatever moment comes, because you've been doing this and you prep yourself for it, and you don't realize that you're preparing yourself for it. As the legendary Darryl Green would say, that right now moment. Yeah. You always want to be prepared for that right now moment, and he said his whole career was a right now moment. And, he ended up doing 20 years in the league and becoming one of the greatest corners of all time. Yes. Coming out of Texas A&M, same school that produced Gene Upshaw and a few others that have come out of that school. And John Randall, and I'm not going to go through the whole lineage, but when you look at a guy that become a first-round pick out of a small school like that and being prepared for that right now moment, it's a beautiful thing. Just like you were sitting down with Walt Michaels, who is a defensive guru that most younger folks don't know who he is. You sat down and talked to Buddy Ryan. You had Weed Eubank at your access. Then you had Philbin, you had Joe Namath, you had Woody Hayes, Lou Holtz. You had so much football knowledge at your fingertips. Yeah. And you were groomed. And the moment that you took hold of you took the bull by the horns, you pretty much just went on ahead, wrote it out, and did great, because you're responsible for a Hall of Famer getting there out of Temple University and Joe Flacco, and a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame is Mr. Mark Gastineau. Shout out to you, Mr. Gastineau. And yes, I still agree with you on this. Brett Favre gave
They took it
Michael
all.
Strahan that record. I said it. That's not Miss Carberg. This is a football fan, and I love Strahan because I love my HBCU players. But and he worked his ass off to get to that point. Not gonna discredit him because for him to play football in high school for 1 to 2 years and become a Hall of Famer, that's very tough to do.
Yes.
And for you were one of the best pass rushers of this game that does not get enough credit. Hands down. You don't get enough credit. So if you're watching this, Mr. Gastineau, as much respect and as much love on this end, because again, you're one of the best that played this game that no one talks about. If anybody wants to know what Mark Gastineau was, look at the Las Vegas Raiders and look at Max Crosby. That was Mark Gastineau.
Right. Mm-hmm. And
I'm bringing it modern for you.
Every play gave everything. Of course, he had the sack dance. Now everybody dances, but back then, they didn't like it. But as I said, times change and things change. And I agree.
He got in a fight with Jackson State legend Jackie Slater, Hall of Famer.
Jackie Slater, that was so hysterical. It really was. And one thing about Mark, whenever he made a sack, he never did it over the quarterback. When he did it, he turned away and did his thing. He danced, but never where it was taunting, as far as people look over the guy and talk to him or something like that.
He still showed a little bit of respect to his opponent or whatnot, because if you ever go back to NFL's Crunch Course, it's on YouTube, and they showed a little piece between he and Lyle Alzado, two different mindsets. Lyle just wanted to kill you and fight you. Lyle was a little off. Love Lyle Alzado. Mark even said it himself. He says, I'm not trying to hit the quarterback as hard. I'm not trying to kill him or break him in half. He just said, I just want to get a sack. That was his only thing, because he knew sacks equaled money.
That's right. That's right. And they actually started making the sack, an actual statistic, which it hadn't been because of the, and then the whole sack exchange having 66 sacks. And as I said, it was really amazing. But I also want to say, Ryan, too, that, you were on Twitter and you're a prime example of all this kind of stuff, because you got in touch with me. You wrote to me. I didn't know all the stuff about you. Right. And but there was just something about you that won me over immediately. I have a lot of people that ask, and I can't do, everybody or whatever, things like that. But you know how sometimes you just feel good about somebody. You feel the connection. You feel, and then on top of it, you were so reliable. Everything you said you were going to do, you did, and on time. And then as I said, look at this, all this, you have so much talent, all this artwork, all this stuff, and all the knowledge you have going back 30 years that I can actually talk to you, and you know who everybody is. So I'm going to say you're a prime example, and just keep doing this, because, as I said, you have a special niche and a special thing here that I think is really awesome. And I'm sure Billy Joe felt it. I'm sure Doug Plank felt it, and all the other people the whole list of people that you've had on here feel that way. And I just got to meet Coach now. And as I said, here's a gentleman who served us just like you did, and now he's coaching these young people and out in Arizona, and he said these kids all want to be there, which I think is so great to hear in this day. So that says a lot for Coach and the kind of person he is too.
And I can't take all the credit for it, because at the end of the day, okay, I'm in the front of the lines, I'm talking, I'm trying to network, but without the magnificent BirdCage crew, my folks that are on the other side, that you saw the other show the other night, Graybeard, K-Dub, Scoop, Turbo, Meltdown, and Coach Brant, we're out here trying to just make sure that this thing goes, because we just want to talk Falcon football, but it's a collective group effort, because these guys come in on their off time like Coach Cam, and they'll step in and help out with the interviews. They'll step in and do pop-up shows. So I can't leave those guys out neither, because I appreciate you, but these guys make me better every day.
So you have a team. You have a team, right? It's a team.
So it's not all about me. I appreciate the compliment, and I'll accept it. Take it to the heart, not to the head. But I think with that crew, I got, like I said, I got one of the best teams out here. The only thing is we're still working and we're still grinding to get to it. And, we're trying to make sure that we continue to present legendary figures such as yourself, and, from former players to legendary folks like Mr. Steve Weiss, who I think is a legend in his own right in the
Sure
journalism
is.
world.
He's awesome.
And we really want to be like, for me, and how I envision doing these interviews, I'm a gatekeeper of history of the sports, and that's something that I've accepted. And God allowed me to have a memory to remember a lot of this stuff.
I know it's really
I also have to give credit to my mom. I hated reading. So without my mom, she told me up front, I'll let you read the Sports Illustrated, the old books and different things like that, but you got to read 2 chapters of a novel. And I hated it. My mom, my Aunt Rhonda, my Aunt Connie, my grandmother, they harped on me because that was what got me into reading. And I was also into world history too. So going back to that, I just love it. So talking old school football with you and talking about comparing the game from back in the day, from what you saw from the field level view that fans don't understand unless you played the game or you were scouting and you were right there watching, people won't understand it.
No, it is. As you and I joked, a lot of people feel that football began in the year 2000. They don't realize that 40 years before that, 50 years before that.
We talked about this, and most of these folks don't understand that American football started from rugby, transitioned to the Ivy League school.
That's right.
And that was just a way to keep military officers in shape. That was the reason why it was done. And then you transition that to big time schools, and then you have players and you have a field of diamonds, and it evolved.
And I say I was very blessed to my parents were same, just like with yours, and the kind of the way they brought my brother. I had 2 brothers, one older, one younger. And, we just played every sport, and they invited everybody over to the house to be together. Of all kinds of people, of everything, all the time. And our house was always open to everybody. And my mother was like, young people won't know who this is, Donna Reed, on the Donna Reed show, right? She was, my mom always in high heels and was perfect looking and everything like that. And made sure she looked so good for my dad when he would come upstairs and he would bring the players upstairs for coffee and cake after he examined them. So as I said, I had a beautiful growing up time, and I was very blessed, and I love being able to share how lucky I've been with people too. That's because that's what there's so much negativity out in the world. Mm-hmm. And there's really a lot of good people, and there's really a lot of goodness amongst, really there are, when you talk to regular people, not what you hear on TV. And there's really so many great things. So I know I'm probably idealistic and all that kind of stuff, but as I said, I have been very blessed, so I like to spread it.
Well, here's the thing. Please don't make this your last time coming into the cage, because we're going to talk football this season, and then we'd love to have you in here. We could talk, because here's the thing. You can actually talk the game and speak it, because a lot of everything that you said, I'm just sitting back. Coach Cam knows why I'm laughing right now. Cam, let's be honest, and I'm okay with it. Everything that I've said, she's echoed pretty much almost everything that I talked about from the scouting department, right?
Absolutely.
I've been saying this for years, but now that we have a true NFL scout in here, before you had your mock drafts and before you had your combines that were televised, we got somebody who understands scouting and still gives pointers to young scouts that are in the making right now, currently. Those pictures that we posted earlier in the introduction showed some of those interactions that you had with Aaron Rodgers and Sam Darnold, Sauce Gardner, and all these guys. So again,
and I've had so many
on the ground level looking at the game.
Yeah, and the other thing, Coach, too, LinkedIn is really good for, like, as your daughter gets a little bit older, because I have met so many, like you just was like you were saying, Ryan. So many people have written to me, like, how do I get into scouting? What do I do? Because, in this day and age, so many times you can't get a human being, it's always an answering machine or, recordings or AI, whatever it may be. And sometimes people just need to talk things out and hear themselves talk and what they really might like. And I've been, as I said, I've had both male and female, and they're all all over the place on different teams now. Representing all, as I said, all facets, and I love doing that. Even at my age, if they still want to talk to me, it's mind blowing.
Well, here's the thing. You're a national treasure. You're a trailblazer. I'm just gonna call it for what it is. You're pretty much. Please don't take this wrong. You're the light-skinned Jackie Robinson of the NFL.
I wish I could.
You're just a little light.
All right, are you ready?
You chop down a lot of barriers, and there are a lot of individuals that owe you an engraved congratulations and thank you at all times. Anytime they see you, they need to give you that, because you literally were the first to walk point and you survived. It's like they talked about Doug Williams, they talked about James Shaq Harrison, all these guys. Here's the thing.
Yes.
You get the opportunity, you're going to jump off the cliff. You're pretty much jumping off the cliff. Sometimes you live, sometimes you don't.
That's right.
You lived.
Yes.
And with you being able to live and make this happen, we have women that are running sports organizations to this day.
Yeah,
so we thank you again for coming in. We appreciate you. We love you. And we definitely going to be in touch. And we are going to have you back during the season so we can break down a little football.
Yeah, we'll do Atlanta and Jets and everything else. That's right. Okay.
Thank you for coming. And also let the folks know your website and your book so they can also purchase that as well.
Okay. Yeah. So you can always reach me it's at Connie Scouts, ConnieScouts, at Connie Scouts. And as I said, the book is, it's behind you. I don't know let's see if I can see it.
They can't see it behind me, but if you have it,
where am I here?
You gotta move it over right there.
Okay.
X's and O's.
X's and O's don't mean I love you. And a young lady that I didn't know. Again, this is how life. She got in touch with me. Her values are very similar. Some people just want a gossipy dirt book or whatever. As I said, I have a lot of great, wonderful life experiences. So this is for young people, for football fans, for women, for anybody, and any age can read it, because there is nothing, that's questionable and anything like that. And I wanted to share what I had. So, it came out, nothing has changed. It came out in 2017, but it's the kind of thing that the history is a history.
Yep.
So,
well, we definitely appreciate you coming on. Also want to shout out to Mr. Chris Carberg, because he was able to set everything up on your end. So Mr. Carberg, thank you. I know that you saw the posters that we had in the chat or whatnot, and we definitely appreciate the cooperation and your assistance as well. So we didn't want to leave a valuable part of your team out as well.
Right. He's done so much for my son. I'm very blessed with a son who I go, help. I don't know what I'm doing on this stuff. Please. I've done like you guys are so good at this stuff. And he comes right to my aid all the time. He does.
Well, we want to thank you for coming through, and we'll see you next time, Ms. Carberg.
Thank you very much. My coach, thank you so much.
Yes, Ryan.
Jets, Jets.
You know what? Because you're a trailblazer, you're one of the only people I sit there and let chant like that on the show. Much love, Ms. Carberg. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That was Ms. Connie Carberg, ladies and gentlemen. That was the first female scout in the NFL. And, even though her stint was short, it was very impactful, not just for the game of football, but for females in charge in sports all across the board. If she doesn't make it, you don't see a lot of these females in these top flight positions with these organizations. So for that to be said in that short period of time, she drafted a Hall of Famer, really supposed to have 3 Hall of Famers off of that defensive line, if you want to be honest, folks. You talk about Mark Gastineau, you talk about Joe Klecko's already there. Abdul Salam should be in the hall too, because they were a dominant force when you talk about the New York Sack Exchange. If you haven't seen the 30 for 30 on that, please check out the 30 for 30. They break it down, they talk about it, and you get to understand what that was like with having a front four like that. Like, I'll be honest, let the Falcons get a front four like that. We're not losing the Super Bowl.
Nope.
We won't lose the Super Bowl if you get a front four like that. I promise you. So, again, we appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight. Definitely check up the pop-up shows. We have a regular show coming back next Thursday, going to talk Falcon football. And we also might have some more guests coming on before the season starts and before training camp starts. But y'all have to tune in to see. So we appreciate you guys for coming in. Coach Cam, thank you for coming in tonight and stepping up in the interview. We appreciate it. Magnificent BirdCage crew, thank you guys for always holding it down behind the scenes and making things happen. We appreciate that. And again, last but damn sure not least, the viewers. Without you guys, we don't have this show. We appreciate your support and growing support for us hitting 800 subscribers on YouTube a couple of weeks ago. We appreciate that. We're actually working. We're 200. I say we're 198 viewers away from 1,000. Let's go ahead and get that stack going, baby. We got to get it right. So sit back, relax, enjoy. If you missed the show, go back and run it back on YouTube. We have love for you. We appreciate you tuning in, but you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here. Because guess what? Your boy got to get some grub, and I got to get a little rest so I can get to the Mognon. And if you don't know what Mognon is, that's money. So keep God first. Hug your family. Y'all stay safe out there. And prayers up for Texas right now. They're going through some stuff, and also North Carolina. We appreciate you guys. We love you. Catch you next time on the next episode. Dose.